Have you been having issues at your flight school? Struggling to find a good instructor? Getting your lessons booked in? Can't get a flight test date? Maybe even just looking to change schools? Well, stick around because right after this, we're going to talk about all of that and so much more. So strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 3614, 95 Mallow, 7 POB with altitude.
Coordinating, Halo, and runner, bank, tower, bank pressure rolling at 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there.
Stand by, star 9000, 1013, K5 25.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 171 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. I'm your host, Trent Robinson. G'day, how are you? Welcome to another amazing week. Certainly had a busy one, as every other week, I would say. But look, I have to say, what a privilege and a highlight to be able to fly two aircraft from the 1940s. Got the DC-3 going again on Friday and, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I flew Friday and did a few beautiful orbits in the sunset around Darwin Harbour there. Just a beautiful evening. And then with 5 aircraft on final for Romeo 11, we got a few more orbits and that was just even better. So just fantastic to do that. Just loving every second in that airplane. I have to tell you, it is an absolute honour and a privilege, and we are loving the experience that's been given to us to do it. And we are still jumping through some hurdles and hoops, but ticking along in the project. So some of you asked when you can come for a ride. Believe me, I will make it very, very clear. The website will let you know as well, and all the social medias. So just hang in there. We just can't say anything right now because I just don't know. But we're just going to keep doing some private flights and keeping our currency every month or so, and hopefully not much longer. And then Saturday, had the privilege again to jump in the Mallard. Again, it's been a while. I'm not line flying the aircraft at the moment. There's enough staff and pilots there, so I'm just filling in for the examination roles for renewing examiner privileges and things. But that was great just to take it across to the TUEs for an IPC. I was conducting the IPC and doing some examiner mentoring as well, which was awesome with Dan. So good stuff. Is very difficult to jump into an aircraft after you haven't flown it for so long and keep up with things. But, you know, I wasn't my 100%, but I wasn't too far off. So more practice needed for around August, where I'll be doing some water landings and that sort of stuff again for a flight instructor proficiency check. So again, looking forward to that and getting back on the water. All right. I've been looking online, and as I do, and a few of you have emailed me as well. And I thought it might be time just to have a bit of a talk about a rather sensitive subject. And I guess overall it's about student rights, what rights you guys have as students and as pilots going to a flying school. But just, it's a very uncomfortable topic. It's a very difficult topic to discuss and raise, and no one wants to cause dramas and that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, usually that means that the pilot, the student, is the one that comes off a little bit worse off. And I have to say, over the years, but certainly over the last couple, I have heard some horror stories, and it angers me greatly when I hear people being stuffed around and treated like pawns on a chessboard, and effectively once you're through the door and deposits are paid or courses are enrolled in, it seems like you've got nothing. Now, I'm obviously not going to talk about individual specific schools or circumstances. It's all going to be very generic, but it will, there's a few just areas I want to talk about, give you some pointers and things to just make you feel a little bit more informed and empowered on where you do stand with these sort of things, but also where I am feeling a little bit disappointed and disillusioned in the support that's advertised as being there, but doesn't seem to be the case. So let's get through some things. And effectively, the first one really is having issues with your flight school. Now, this can be a bit multifaceted because it can be the school, it can be the financial arrangements that are doing the payments and things. It can be with staff and that. So the most common issue probably is just overall poor or average communication, unclear expectations on where you're at, where the course starts, when it finishes, how long is this going to take, the costs that are involved, hidden costs and charges, followed by slow progression, and just having issues with the training overall. It's just not going the way you thought it would. Whether you're right or wrong, that doesn't matter. Communications should solve that problem. So there's a few options open to you here. The first one is obviously talk to your instructor. If you're not happy with what's going on, speak with your instructor. If part of the problem is you don't really have an instructor, you're at a school where you just get scheduled with whoever, well, then you need to step up to the course coordinator or talk to the head of operations. They will be able to assist you and help you. If they don't, well, then you've got to look at the structure of the course that you're in. If it's a fee help style course, there's a lot of requirements that are supposed to be in place to protect you as a student. So you are fully informed, you know what's going on, and you have the information available that is factual that you can then present. And if it's not being done properly and by the book, well, then you might have some recourse there to do something about it. Ultimately, if that's not working and not going the way you want it to do, you've really got a couple of options. You either change instructors or you look at changing schools. That can be a little bit harder, but it is 100% possible, and I will talk about that at the end. Some problems can be with instructor turnover. You had one instructor, you really love flying with them, and then next minute they're gone and you've been allocated to somebody else. Nothing will ever fix this. It's not that the instructor doesn't love you, but not all instructors are career instructors. They're looking for new opportunities, and it is quite common, as frustrating as it is, that they move on and go to the next phase of their career. Yeah, there's nothing you can really do about that than maybe pick an older instructor if one's available to you who's probably more of a career instructor. But yeah, it is frustrating, and it can be impactful on your learning consistency, on your standardization and all that sort of thing. But yeah, there's not a whole lot you can do about instructor turnover. All right. But if you are, looking to start out and picking an instructor, maybe that's a consideration that if that's important to you that you can have, and, just sort of ask where they're at in their career and if they're hanging around for a little while or maybe going to be moving on soon. And that might affect your choice in what instructor you choose to fly with, if you even get the choice. Other times you can just have a bit of an instructor-student mismatch. All right. Again, you can speak up, you can open the conversation if you've got the confidence to do that. Older students obviously have a bit more life experience. They're more comfortable in doing that sort of thing. Younger ones, not. We tend to, when we're young, we withdraw and just sort of take it and just assume that that's how it is. But there are things you can do. Otherwise, you can talk to the head of operations, like I said, or the course coordinator, any of those issues, and have a chat and then see if you can get some sort of resolution. All right, booking lessons. Now, this can go a number of ways. Not enough aircraft, too many broken aircraft, not enough instructors, or you might be a self-funded student and somehow that is put as less than a fee help or other course style student, and you keep getting bumped and moved to keep the other schedules on the go. I would seriously look at just moving schools if that's how you're treated, and if that's all they think that your money's less important and not as good as somebody else's. it's something that I've never really understood. I'm scheduled right the way through to August, October. I have run ground school courses and flight training courses for 20 plus students and had them all scheduled in. Everyone got the same number of lessons each week. Sure, with weather affected things, it changes, and as students are getting closer to test dates, there might be a little bit of prioritization to make sure they get through without big gaps, and everybody understands that. And these things happen. Sometimes you can't control everything. But yeah, I've never really understood the complaints and the stories that I've been hearing of late of the way they were scheduled and lucky to get a flight once a month or every few weeks. And they're meant to be on a full-time course. Don't understand it. If the school can't handle the volume of students that it's recruiting, then it shouldn't be recruiting anymore. But unfortunately, that's a case of, well, we've got you now, we've got your money, and we need that to operate, and we'll get to you when we can. And so a 12-month course turns out to be an 18, 24-month plus. Yeah, I have real issues with that, and I'd really encourage you to speak up and, again, look at the options that are available to you to get some more flying scheduled in your program and really ride them hard on that one and make a bit of noise. Aircraft maintenance does come up. Obviously, newer aircraft are hopefully more reliable. Older aircraft can have issues. I've got 3 older aircraft, but are all well maintained and looked after, and certainly don't get flown as hard as some flying school aircraft do. But, you know, most airplanes like to be flown, and they tend to operate better when they are flown. The problem happens when you drag it out after a big break, and that's usually where issues start to happen as well. But make sure that the fleet of the school that you're looking at has well-maintained aircraft, whether they're new or old, and they should be planning things well enough to avoid big errors and delays in your training. Now, having said that, we are in a bit of a unique situation now where parts are not as available as they were. Factories that did build things shut down. Engine parts and all that are taking much longer to overhaul and rebuild and produce. So I know a lot of aircraft are parked up here in Darwin waiting on engines and things. So there are genuine reasons why that can happen, and everyone works through it. But again, coming back to my first point, open communication. Everyone's willing to accept a bit of mucking around if the school's clearly doing their best to try and overcome the issues. But it's when you're just sort of treated poorly and not told what's going on, that's where we need to have some intervention and maybe look at other options, cross-hired aircraft, other leases and that sort of stuff. All right, flight test dates. Sometimes there's a shortage on examiners. Sometimes examiners get busy doing other things. And so you're there sitting waiting for a flight test. What can you do? You can't go and organise your own examiner. Part of the flight school requirements is you need to do a pre-license, and then part of that process you'll then get recommended for a flight test, and the head of operations will assign a flight examiner to you. Now, sure, someone else might actually do that, but the head of operations has to approve which examiner is used. So you could go to the head of operations and say, hey, I've got Mr. and Mrs. Bloggs here ready to conduct my flight test. Can they be used, please? And hopefully there's no history there or any problems with that sort of thing. That may mean there's a difference in cost or something like that, which again, you'll need to discuss and negotiate. But otherwise, that's really about as much as you can do other than put some pressure on and look at moving schools. If they're really not coming up with the goods, if they're just messing you around and delaying you genuinely, of course it doesn't happen often, but it can happen. That's about all you can do in terms of trying to choose your own examiner. Right? Sometimes there is a shortage weather delays cause backlogs, and then, that can cause trouble. Not much we can do about that. Sometimes we could go flying, but the student elects not to. Again, it's their choice. It's their flight test, and something we need to just sort of factor in as well. It can create unexpected backlog. All right. But just be prepared to wait, find out what the sort of access to flight examiners is in your area, maybe slow down your training a little bit so it all kind of works well without having a big gap in the middle there, and see how you go. But yeah, definitely have to consult with the head of operations there to see what options are available to you to keep things moving. All right. Speaking of flight tests, sometimes before you can do a flight test, you need to do an exam. Now, ASPEC are the exam administrator here in Australia, and they're the ones that look after the exam sittings and where they are and how often they are. So you need to go to their website and check out when the exams are coming up, and you need to use that information to plan your exams accordingly. Now, sometimes it's not necessarily going to be a sitting date when you're ready to do it. You might have to really coordinate your thought processes and your flight lessons as to when these exams are going to be available to sit, depending on your area and location. I know up in Darwin here at the moment, they're like one day every 2 weeks, which is getting a bit ridiculous for some. It's if you fail or you just can't make that particular day, it can be months, literally before a day comes up that works for you. So make sure you factor this in. Don't leave your exams till the last minute, because this is always a major timeline blowout cause. Nothing to do with the flight schools at all. It's our tardiness in studying, because let's face it, sometimes studying is not as much fun. But hey, it's flying, it's aviation, so it should be fun. So hit the books hard, plan ahead. You might need to look at this a couple of months out just so you make sure that everything lines up nicely and you can have yourself a far less stressful exam period. The school will let you know this. Sometimes the schools themselves have their own exam approvals, not necessary for every single exam, but for the most of the ones that you need to do, which will definitely help with access and regularity. But if you have to go to an ASPEC centre, then it can be a little bit trickier. All right, final one, changing flight schools. If it's just going pear-shaped, sometimes it's got nothing to do with that. Sometimes it's just you moved states, moved suburbs, moved locations. All right, so it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but what are your options? First of all, it depends on the course you're doing. If you're doing a non-integrated course, it's pretty easy. You can just request your files now. Formerly, what used to happen was the chief flying instructor had to write to the other chief flying instructor and request the student file. Now, if you have a look at the regulations, the student can request their file and they can take that with them and then give it to the new flying school. That can be in digital format. Generally, they don't like to do it in physical format because flight schools are required to retain a copy of training records for up to 7+ years, depending on the nature of their training approvals. But you can get a copy of your file. Otherwise, normally just what happens is the head of operations, the former CFI, now head of operations, the WHO will write to the other WHO and just request them and get emailed through that way. And that way nothing gets lost. So that's fairly straightforward. What you do have to factor into that process, though, is each school has an approved syllabus. Mostly are all the same, but sometimes there's little differences there. So as long as we can establish what it is you've already completed, what's the standard and what's left to go, then there shouldn't be too much impact on what's happening with your training, and it should pretty much pick up where you left off. If you're in an RTO environment, a 142 integrated school environment, a little bit trickier. Again, you can still move. If you're on an RTO fee health setup, if you're past census date, you run the risk of blowing your DOSH. There's nothing much you can do about that. There might be some extenuating circumstances where you can get it back. Some schools are really good with this and they will refund you or credit you back to your fee help allowance at least any amount that is unused. Others are a little bit more scrupulous where they will go, sorry, census day is passed and that money is as good as spent. That's everyone's individual prerogative of how they want to run business, and I'm not going to comment on that other than I think that's probably a bit rough. But anyway, it's well within their rights. They do have budgets and admin staff and all that sort of stuff that need to be paid for, and that's why fee help courses are always costing much more than if you were just to pay for it directly. So you do have to factor that in. If it's a self-funded integrated program, then a bit easier as far as the funding side goes. You can withdraw. The previous school will then again send their file. The new student the new head of operations will review the student and your file, where you got up to, and then they'll decide where you fit into their integrated training process. They may opt to start a particular phase again. It's up to them to decide that, and you need to sort of have that conversation with them before you make the decision to change, to make sure that you're fully aware of what cost penalties, I guess you could call it, may exist. All right, so you don't just sort of get there and then they go, well, sorry, but you're going to have to do the last 15, 20 hours again. There are some requirements there, and you'll need to have that individual chat before you make the final decision. All right, so hopefully all of that sort of helps a little bit more with the situation. Again, sometimes there's no real perfect outcome, but, you know, if you are switching schools because of issues, do what you can to try and solve it first. Talk to other instructors, examiners, other students, get a feel of what's going on. If it is just a genuine problem that the school you're at is trying to solve, then, you know, work through it. But again, if it's just not happening, then sure, have a look at other alternatives. But make sure you do your due diligence and check out the new school and make sure that's going to actually meet your requirements, so you're not walking out of one issue into another. And it doesn't have to be a bad experience necessarily. Again, schools understand that people change life and move around, and that one's always very straightforward. I'm sure you'll say farewell and they'll wish you all the best with the rest of your career. But if it is because of an unpleasant situation, you know, there's no real sugarcoating it, unfortunately, but just maintain your professionalism and your integrity. They can do what they want, but just make sure that you do stand up for your rights. You know that if you're entitled to refunds and all that sort of thing, and not let yourself get messed around any more than has already happened. Alrighty. Good luck, and hopefully you can get all those sort of things sorted out. And you do have rights. You do have options available to you. But yeah, communication is the key. Don't sit there and remain silent, because that's not going to help anyone. All right, guys, have a fantastic week. Please stay safe. A lot of weather around the country at the moment with winter and things really kicking off. The temperatures are plummeting down south. So make sure you stay warm and dry, and read those forecasts carefully. And we will talk again in the next episode. All right. Until then, stay safe, blue skies, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.